Everett Dunmore was 37 years old when his wife left him for a man in a red Ferrari. And the only thing she did not know, the one thing she had never once thought to ask in 8 years of marriage, was whose name was on the registration. To Simone, Everett was a logistics coordinator who drove a 9-year-old Accord, kept a budget spreadsheet on the refrigerator, and had never once in their marriage surprised her with anything she had not asked for first. Her sister called him Steady Eddie. Her mother called him Reliable, and managed to make it sound like a consolation. Simone herself had stopped finishing his sentences about 2 years before she stopped pretending to listen. Then one Thursday evening in September, she came home late, perfume slightly wrong, and told him she needed space to figure out who she was. And the following Saturday, a red Ferrari California pulled up to their house on Bromley Avenue in Nashville, and she walked out the front door with a packed bag and got in without looking back. The man behind the wheel was named Trent Ashby, 41, commercial real estate broker, broad shoulders, hair that looked professionally arranged, the kind of man who believed a car announced something permanent about its driver. What neither of them knew was that the Ferrari California, registration number TN4471GX, was Unit 7 of 12 in the premium exotic tier of Dunmore Prestige Rentals, and that as of that Saturday morning it had been rented for 4 days at $1,850 per day. What they could not have known was that Everett had owned that company for 6 years, and that its annual revenue the previous fiscal year had cleared $2.3 million. The man she left him for had been renting the life she thought she was escaping into. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The garage on Bromley Avenue was where Everett Dunmore did his best thinking. Not the attached garage, the detached one behind the house, which he had spent a long weekend converting in year 3 of their marriage from a crumbling storage space into something functional and clean, with pegboard walls for his tools and a workbench his Uncle Gerald had helped him build from reclaimed oak. The overhead light was good in there. The smell was mineral and honest, oil and sawdust, and the particular coolness of poured concrete. He went out there most evenings after dinner, not always to do anything, sometimes just to stand in the quiet and let the day settle. His grandmother had told him once, when he was 12 years old and furious about something he could no longer remember, "You don't have to act on everything you feel, baby. Feel it. Set it down, then decide what to do." She had been a woman who raised 4 children on a school cafeteria income in Memphis, who owned her own home by the time she was 44, and who had died at 81 still sharper than anyone in the room. He had carried that line with him like a tool he kept clean for when it was needed. Everett was a methodical man. His logistics background had made him that way. Or perhaps he had gone into logistics because he already was. It was difficult to separate the temperament from the training after a certain number of years. He had spent 8 years in freight coordination for a regional distribution company before he understood that what he was actually doing was managing the movement of expensive things between people who valued them and people who didn't. And one afternoon in his early 30s, he had asked himself whether there was a version of that insight he could own. Dunmore Prestige Rentals had started with 2 vehicles, a Porsche Cayenne and a Maserati Ghibli he had purchased at Fleet Auction, and a business license filed through a registered agent in Atlanta. He had kept the company in his own name and had told almost no one. Not because he was hiding it exactly, but because he had learned early that the most expensive thing you could attach to a growing business was someone else's expectations of what it meant. He had watched too many people announce things before they were real, and then spend more energy on the announcement than on the work. By the time he married Simone in year 1, the fleet had grown to 5 vehicles and a small maintenance contract with a Nashville luxury concierge service. He had intended to tell her. He had told himself he would tell her when the revenue was stable. And then when it was stable, he told himself he would tell her when the structure was right. And then, years passed the way years pass inside a marriage, where you are both working and busy, and each of you gradually stops asking the questions that matter. Simone was a buyer for a regional home furnishings chain, sharp eye for aesthetics, good instincts for trend. The kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately understood what it was trying to be. She had found Everett competent and steady and, he suspected now, quietly boring in a way she had expected to outgrow, but had simply grown more specific about instead. He had noticed the signs the way he noticed inefficiencies in a logistics route, not all at once, but accumulating until the pattern was undeniable. The later evenings. The new wardrobe that had not been discussed, the twice-weekly gym membership that had started in the spring and which had produced, by August, a version of Simone that was slightly more careful about how she held her phone when he was nearby. He had not raised it. He was not ready to raise it. He was, as his grandmother would have said, feeling it first, setting it down, deciding. Then the Thursday evening came with the wrong perfume, and the Saturday with the red Ferrari, and Simone walked out, and the front door closed behind her. And Everett stood in the living room for a long moment, in the silence of his own house, and then walked out to the garage. He stood at the workbench, with his hands flat on the reclaimed oak surface his Uncle Gerald had helped him build. He breathed. He had a decision to make. And he was going to make it correctly. He knew it was Unit 7 before he checked. He knew because he had a memory for his fleet, the way a man who builds something with his hands remembers every piece of it. Not because he tracked obsessively, but because he cared about each vehicle, the way you care about things you have chosen, and maintained, and kept running correctly. A red Ferrari California with a particular scuff on the lower front fascia he had been meaning to have detailed was not something he would misplace in his mind. He pulled up the fleet management software on his phone. Unit 7. Rented Thursday morning. Renter, Trent D. Ashby. Driver's license on file. Credit card on file. 4-day premium rental. Pickup confirmed at 9:14 a.m. Current GPS position, his own street. His hands did not shake. He stood in the garage with the phone in his palm, and he felt the specific quality of clarity that comes not from surprise, but from confirmation. The feeling of a number that comes back exactly as calculated, even when you had hoped the calculation was wrong. He did not call anyone. He did not go back inside. He took a slow breath, set the phone face down on the workbench, and stood there for a while in the good quiet of the garage. Then he picked the phone back up and opened the rental agreement. Trent D. Ashby had rented from Dunmore Prestige Rentals 11 times in the previous 22 months. Not always the Ferrari. Twice the Porsche. Once the Aston Martin DB11 that anchored the top of the fleet. The rental history stretched back almost 2 years, which meant that during a period when Everett had been aware of something shifting in his marriage, the man shifting it had been paying Everett for the vehicle he used to do it. He sat down on the stool beside the workbench. He thought about that for a moment. Then, because he was a logistics man and logistics men built timelines before they built solutions, he opened a blank note on his phone and began to work backward. The first rental had been 22 months ago. A long weekend, premium package, the Cayenne. He cross-referenced the date against his own memory. That had been the weekend Simone attended a work conference in Knoxville. He checked his email for the hotel confirmation she had forwarded him. Knoxville, same weekend. The fourth rental, overnight, Maserati Ghibli. A Tuesday in January. He recalled that January, Simone had spent a Tuesday evening at a colleague's birthday dinner and come home after midnight. The ninth rental, 4 days, Ferrari, California. A stretch in July when Simone had told him she was visiting her college roommate in Chattanooga. He built the timeline. It took 40 minutes. When he was finished, he had 11 data points across 22 months, each one aligned with a gap or an absence in his own memory of his wife's movements. Each one paid for on a credit card registered to Trent D. Ashby, each one in a vehicle registered to Dunmore Prestige Rentals, LLC, owner of record, Everett James Dunmore. He had documentation. The rental company's records were his records. He picked up his phone and made a single call. "It's Everett," he said when the line connected. "I need to come see you. Not tomorrow. Tonight, if you can." "How bad?" said the voice. "It's manageable," he said. "I just need to know the right order of steps." There was a brief pause. "Come now. I'll put the coffee on." He turned off the garage light and walked back through the quiet house and got in his 9-year-old Accord and drove. Reginald Osai had been practicing business and family law in Nashville for 31 years. He had gone to school with Everett's uncle Gerald, which was how Everett had found him in his late 20s when he was setting up the rental company's legal structure. And he had been Everett's attorney on every meaningful document since. He was 63, heavyset, with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who had seen nearly every variety of human urgency and had come to trust the ones who arrived calm. He sat across from Everett at his kitchen table at 9:30 on a Saturday night and listened without interrupting while Everett laid it out. The rental history, the timeline, the GPS record, the credit card trail, the marriage, the Thursday evening, the Ferrari pulling up to the house, all of it. When Everett finished, Reginald looked at the phone for a moment and then set it on the table between them. "She knows nothing about the company," he said. "Nothing. 8 years of marriage, and she never asked about your income beyond the logistics salary. She knew I had some investments. She knew about 2 of the vehicles. I told her years ago I owned a couple of luxury cars I rented out on weekends. She thought it was a hobby." Reginald looked at him for a moment, with the particular expression of a man who is measuring something carefully. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state. Marital assets are subject to division, but separate business interests, specifically interests that were established before the marriage, kept in a separate business entity, never commingled with marital funds, those have a strong basis for classification as separate property. He paused. "The company predates the marriage? By 2 years. All revenue has always gone into the business account. I paid myself a management salary, which went into the joint account. The company itself, the fleet, the contracts, the retained earnings. She has never touched any of it. And she signed the prenuptial agreement we drew up." "She did." Reginald picked up his coffee. "Then, what you have, Everett, is a situation where the man who has been conducting an affair with your wife using your own rental vehicle has been, in effect, funding your legal position against her." He said it without amusement, just with the clean accuracy of a man stating a legal and factual observation. "The rental records are business records. They're yours, admissible. The timeline you've constructed tonight will take our paralegal about 2 hours to formalize." "What do I do about the current rental?" Everett said. "The car comes back Tuesday." Reginald considered this. "Let it run. Don't touch it. When it comes back, process it exactly as you would any other return. Document the condition. Process the charge. Keep the record clean. And then we file." He set his cup down. "But first, I want you to call your uncle Gerald. Not for legal reasons, just because he should know, and because you need to talk to someone who knew you before all this." Everett drove to his uncle's house after midnight. Gerald Dunmore was 71, a retired high school shop teacher who still kept a wood shop in his basement and who had taught Everett to use a level when Everett was 9 years old. He made eggs at midnight the same way he did at 7 in the morning, without remarking on the hour, and he listened while Everett talked. And when Everett was done, Gerald was quiet for a moment, and then said what he always said when someone he loved was facing something hard. "What does the work require?" "Patience," Everett said. "Documentation. Staying calm. Then that's what you do." Gerald pushed the eggs across the table. "You already know how to do all three." Two things came to light in the following week that Everett had not known when he sat down with Reginald. The first was that Trent Ashby's commercial real estate brokerage was under a licensing review by the Tennessee Real Estate Commission, a complaint filed by a former business partner regarding misrepresented commissions on 2 commercial transactions. The review had been ongoing for 7 months. Everett's paralegal surfaced it in 40 minutes of public record research. The second was that Trent Ashby did not own the Ferrari California he had rented 11 times. He did not own any of the vehicles he had used to construct the image he had presented to Simone. The apartment he kept in Midtown Nashville, the one with the doorman and the city view, was a furnished short-term lease, the kind used by people between permanent addresses or between permanent identities. The life Simone had chosen over her marriage was a rental. All of it. Right down to the car. Everett sat with that for a full evening in his garage. He ran his hands along the surface of the oak workbench. He thought about what his grandmother had told him. Feel it. Set it down. Decide. He had felt it. He had set it down. He was deciding. Preparation, he had learned in 8 years of logistics, was not the same as hesitation. It was the work you did so that when the moment came, the execution was clean. He called Reginald in the morning. "We're ready," he said. Simone Dunmore arrived at Reginald Osai's conference room on a Wednesday morning, believing she was there for an initial mediation consultation about an amicable separation. Her attorney, a younger woman named Cassandra, had prepared her for a standard asset discussion. They came in together, composed and organized, with a yellow legal pad and the expectation of a manageable morning. Trent Ashby was not present. That was the first thing Simone noticed. The second was Everett's Uncle Gerald, seated along the side wall in a good suit, hands folded, watching the door. The third was the stack of documents centered on the table in front of Reginald's chair. Reginald began without ceremony. He was that kind of man. He laid the first document, the business registration for Dunmore Prestige Rentals, LLC, dated 6 years and 4 months before this morning, ownership of record 100%, Everett James Dunmore. He laid the fleet schedule, 12 vehicles, current appraised value submitted by an independent assessor, $1.4 million. He laid the prior year revenue summary, $2. $3 million gross, certified by the company's CPA. He laid the prenuptial agreement Simone had signed before their wedding, which contained a provision she had apparently never revisited, a clause identifying any business interests held separately and kept separate as non-marital property. Cassandra leaned in and read quietly. Her expression moved in the way expressions do when the document says something the conversation had not prepared for. Simone looked at the fleet schedule. She looked at the vehicle list. Her eye traveled down the column of makes and models, the Porsche, the Maserati, the Bentley, the 2 Lamborghinis, the Aston Martin, and there, 7th on the list, the Ferrari California. She was very still for a moment. Unit 7, Everett said. He said it quietly. He said it the way a man reads a number off a page, without drama, without heat. Tennessee plate TN 4471GX. Rented 11 times over the past 22 months. He slid the rental history across the table, always to the same customer. Cassandra put her hand on Simone's arm. Reginald produced the timeline next, the paralegal's version, clean and formatted, 11 dates in the left column, rental vehicles in the center column. Simone stated whereabouts on those dates in the right column, sourced from emails, calendar entries, and her own prior representations. Simone's composure did not break exactly. It did something more specific. It reorganized. The version of herself she had walked into the room with, the one that had a story about freedom and choice, and a man who represented something her marriage had not, began to reframe itself against the information on the table, and the reframing was not going well. "He didn't tell you," she said. "It wasn't quite a question." "No," Everett said. "I didn't." She looked at him. "The cars. All of this, all those years. You never—" "I was going to," he said. "And then I kept waiting for the right time, and the right time kept not arriving. And then it stopped mattering because you had already decided." He paused. "The company isn't why I'm here, Simone. I'm here because you made a choice, and I'm choosing to move forward cleanly. The prenuptial agreement means the business stays with me. The marital assets will be divided equitably." He looked at her steadily. "That's all this is." Cassandra, to her credit, recognized the ground her client was standing on and advised her accordingly. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. It was not warm, but it was professional. And when it ended, Simone stood and gathered her things and paused at the door. "The man you left me for," Everett said, before she went, "has a licensing review pending with the State Real Estate Commission. His Midtown apartment is a short-term furnished lease. The lifestyle he showed you, the car, the dinners, the image of it, he's been renting that too." He said it without satisfaction, just with the level, informational tone of a logistics coordinator closing out a shipment record. "I thought you should know what you actually chose." Gerald Dunmore rose from his chair along the wall and held the door for her. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Everett gathered his copies of the documents. He nodded to Reginald. He walked out into the Nashville morning and stood on the sidewalk and let the September air settle around him. The work had been done correctly. He drove back to Bromley Avenue and then past it, and kept driving until he reached the rental facility on the far side of the city, where his fleet manager, a capable man named Desmond, was already receiving Unit 7 for its Tuesday return, 2 days late. A detail that would generate an additional $3,700 in late fees that Trent Ashby's credit card would process automatically before the week was out. Some things return to you in the end, sometimes literally. 10 months later, Everett Dunmore sold the house on Bromley Avenue. He had not planned to. The divorce had finalized in March, clean, per the prenuptial agreement, equitable distribution of the marital assets, the business remaining wholly his. But Bromley Avenue was a house built around a version of a life that was finished now. And he had walked through the rooms one evening in early spring and understood, with the same clarity he brought to logistics problems, that the most efficient thing was to let it go. He bought a property in East Nashville. Older bones, good light. A garage that needed work. He spent weekends on it through the summer, doing what he could himself and hiring out what he couldn't. And by August it was something he recognized as his own, rather than the remnant of something shared. The rental company had grown. In the months following the divorce, he had signed 2 new corporate contracts, luxury fleet arrangements with a hospitality group and a high-end event production company that had pushed annual revenue past $3.1 million. Desmond had been promoted to operations director. Everett had taken on a second full-time detail technician and was scouting a second facility location south of the city. He had also, in a quiet way he had not expected, begun spending evenings with a woman named Imani, a commercial property appraiser he had met at a business development seminar in February. She had sat 2 seats down from him and asked a question during the session that revealed, in one sentence, that she understood the difference between assessed value and actual worth. He had found himself thinking about that question for 2 days afterward. He had called the seminar organizer to ask for the attendee contact list and then felt embarrassed about it and almost not sent the email, and then sent it anyway because he had lived long enough to know that the things worth having generally required you to be willing to look slightly foolish in pursuit of them. Imani was precise and dry-humored, and asked the second question, always. She was not performing anything for him. She did not need the life he had. She had built her own. She fit beside him the way a well-calibrated tool fits a task, not dramatically, just correctly. Through Gerald, who heard things through the connections of a man who had spent 30 years in Nashville schools and knew everyone's cousin, Everett learned what became of the others without seeking it out. Simone had moved to a smaller apartment in a different part of the city. The position at her company had become uncomfortable enough, after the details of the divorce became known in their shared professional circles, that she had eventually taken a lateral move to a competitor at a reduced territory. She was managing. She was not flourishing. Trent Ashby's real estate license had been suspended for 90 days, pending the resolution of the commission review, which had ultimately resulted in a formal censure and a civil judgment payable to his former business partner. The Midtown furnished apartment was no longer his. He had, by last report, relocated to Memphis, which Everett found quietly and irrationally funny, and then decided he was allowed to find funny, because he was not, in fact, a man without a sense of humor. He was simply a man who kept it to himself. On a Saturday morning in October, Everett stood in the new garage on the East Nashville property with a cup of coffee going cold on the workbench. The pegboard walls were not up yet. The overhead light needed rewiring. His tools were still in organized boxes along the floor, waiting to be given their proper places. Imani had come by that morning. She had walked through the garage and looked at it with an appraiser's eye and said it had good bones and good proportions, and that the windows on the south side would give him excellent working light in winter, and that the concrete floor was solid. She had not said anything sentimental about it. She had simply recognized it for what it was, a structure worth investing in, built on a foundation that would hold. She had gone back inside to make coffee and left him there with the morning, and the tools in their boxes, and all the work still ahead. He looked at the south windows. The light was coming in exactly as she had said it would. "You don't have to act on everything you feel," his grandmother had told him. "Feel it, set it down, decide." He had felt it. He had set it down. He had decided. He picked up the first box of tools and began. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.